And it's a bit of a very ultra-conservative Christian thought to say, well, you know, people shouldn't mess with your theology, right? Well, that's bad theology. It's not a slippery slope.
I was going to ask you about that because that's what I was told my whole life.
If we get to grow up and put our big boy and big girl Christian pants on and live in the real world and say, hey, if my belief system can't be stress tested with relationships, then it's faith probably isn't worth too much, right?
It's Brian Nietzel, and he said that he has always known two things about himself. Number one, he loves Jesus. Number two, he is gay. At one point, his faith and sexuality seemed divided because he didn't just want God's tolerance, he wanted God's blessing. Today, he shares with us his journey of rediscovering the heart of Jesus and how he now knows in his bones that God has his and the LGBTQ plus community's back. The founder of Making Things Right, Brian facilitates powerful conversations where LGBTQ plus individuals and families, a lot who are conservative, join these calls to engage in meaningful and restorative conversations that bridge divides. Brian leads these with such grace and kindness because, as he says, he is not here to defend positions, but to defend people. This is Brian Nietzel.
All right, Brian.
All right, Heather.
Let's pretend you're on an airplane and there's a stranger sitting next to you and they look over and they say, what do you do for a living? How do you respond?
Man, I've always struggled with my own personal elevator pitch. I've always been a bivocational person most of my life, meaning I have like a day job that kind of pays the bills. And then like a more of a change the world, you know, kind of vocation. So sometimes it's which one I want to talk about. But usually I pivot to I don't really care about my day job as much. I really care more about, you know, the kind of like my other vocational stuff. So usually I'll say something like, I'm passionate about loving my neighbor, and I collaborate with people that care about that. And like it's hard to like dig into stuff when you don't know where somebody's coming from, right? So I'll just put something out there and just see how people respond to it. You know, like because I'm not going to say, hey, I run a Christian organization that invites curious Christians to love their LGBTQ plus neighbor differently. You know, well,
so say that.
I don't know if this person like is a Christian or not, or is gay or straight or what,
ride,
you know. So I'll usually put something like little out there to see how they respond to it, to know where they want to go with the conversation, because ultimately it's about what kind of conversation can we have.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm just going to be really honest with you. I feel like I have met few people do it as well as I've seen you do it. I came across your content on Instagram, and then I listened to your podcast, Making Things Right, and I'm running down the road because I'm a runner, and I'm literally crying while I'm running. Like, it was just such an honest, beautiful conversation. And then,
what about it made you cry, or what tapped you that way?
It was so,
not the particular content, but just like the, you know.
And it wasn't just this episode because, you know, since then consuming a lot of your content, it's so honest, and not honest in a I'm angry, burn everything down.
Yeah.
But I wrote down here, you said in one of them, not, you know, you're here not to defend positions, but to defend people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that element. And then there's also the element, God, we were like 3 minutes in and I'm already like feeling this. There's also the element, which by the way, I'm just a big old baller.
I love that.
There's also the element of not giving up on the message of Jesus and rethinking that.
Yeah.
You know, and getting to know you, and like you stand in such a scary ass place to people who a lot of folks have written off.
Mm-hmm.
And you do it with such grace. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of really deep questions around offense and being a voice and a controversial arena and all of that. But before we get into all of those weeds, what's important to understand contextually about you and your story before we
dive in?
Save the world on this 1 hour.
Because we are.
Sorry, that was really deep.
Because
but like,
we are going to save the world in
Maybe.
these next 45 minutes or
Maybe.
however long you're going to talk to me. It just happens. Probably why you have a unique emotional response to listening to my content or the guests that I have or the conversations that I try to facilitate is because I just don't take sides. And I think that's unusual and I don't even it's funny, in the work that I do to try to make this world a little more of a just place and a Christian place in the truest sense of the word. There's a lot of people that do different types of work. There's people that have to rally against injustice and yell at the idiots that are causing harm and stuff, and that's legit work. I just feel called to kind of be in the messy middle. And it's not even that hard for me because, and I could tell you a little bit about my, story of why, but, I grew up my whole life being more conservative in my belief systems and more of a evangelical kind of Christian traditional mindset. And it but I'm a gay man, so it took a lot of work for me to reconcile my long held beliefs with my attractions, right?
Yeah.
And I did that in a way that was really authentic, and I didn't want to make the Bible say it's something it's not. I didn't, I wanted to serve God and all that stuff, and I walked that journey, and you get on the other side of that, and you never forget the tension of that, So I just sort of, I don't know why, but I just have a lot of patience for folks that at least on this particular issue, for example, of how to love our LGBTQ plus neighbor in a way that I would argue that Jesus would, the stuff that gets in the way of making that really simple. A lot of my content and a lot of my invitations are really simple, but we all have a lot of baggage and stuff that's built into our DNA that gets in the way of that.
Yeah.
So I remember how hard it is to reconcile long-held beliefs with new stirrings of compassion, and I don't think I'll ever forget that tension. And so I choose to respect that. And that's probably the only, if I ever get any critique in my work, it's from people that feel like I'm too patient, for people that are a little maybe behind the curve of re-examining some of this stuff for the sake of loving people. But I think everybody deserves an on-ramp to this conversation, even if it's, a lot of us don't rethink things unless it becomes personal,
That's what amazes me when I met you, because I remember talking to you, and your target audience is folks who lean Christian, conservative, and struggle with accepting folks in the LGBTQ community. And when you talk to these folks and when you're sharing, I know that it was your critique, that was the thing that I was like, that is so amazing that he can be so unemotional and listen to people and not get, because this is a lot of your story too, and not taking things personally and so forth. Why was it important for you to reach those folks as opposed to maybe, I don't know, a demographic that agreed with the stance?
Well, probably because they don't, I don't know. They've already done their own sort of re-examination, if you will. So it's I want to help people feel like actually rethinking how to love people that are different than you is actually the right thing to do. Yeah. That's really kind of it. And so I think if people have already kind of gone on that journey, and again, like I said, most people don't go on that journey unless it becomes personal.
Yeah.
But the beauty of why this is really evolving in sort of the history books, if you will, and probably 10 to 15 years from now, this will be a non-event within the church, it's my opinion, or at least it'll be less of an issue, is because proximity just keeps increasing. So it's it's really hard to, everybody's got somebody in their life, that is LGBTQ plus, right? And so the more you meet people, the more it really causes you to, and the more that those people will be open to sharing their stories of hurt or rejection or discrimination, whether it's within their families or their churches or whatever, the more it breaks your heart and creates tension and gives you more courage to sort of lean in and sort of rethink some of your belief systems, And I'm a believer that doesn't necessarily mean there's a lot of language around this, like affirming versus welcoming versus inclusive and all of that. I don't tend to get hung up on some of that language, but some people, just move more in the direction of agreeing to disagree on this stuff.
Yeah.
That's a really healthy posture, in my opinion,
Yeah.
I think that's true about some people in my family, that came to my wedding. I don't, they were able to bifurcate. They were able to trust me and my relationship with God and the conclusions that I came to, and yet maybe still think that dudes shouldn't get married. Like they could coexist. They could let that coexist because they love me and they cared about me. And I think we can all do that.
My first question I had written that I wanted to ask you was about your relationship with God and what kept you so loyal to God, because I can't imagine how much like pain and confusion and things that you went through for so long.
For sure.
And I have a tendency, and I have done, where I just push away. I'm a runner. I will run my ass out that door. You know what I'm saying? Like if I feel hurt or whatever. But you leaned into the discomfort. And I just love to hear whatever you have to share with that part.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fortunate in that I grew up in a Christian home, but it wasn't like a Christian home out of obligation. It was like my mom especially like really modeled what it looked like to have a relationship with God, right? So it was a personal thing. It wasn't an obligation thing. So that was my Christian foundation. It was relational, right? I believed in the Bible. I read the Bible. But do you know what I mean? Like it was more, the foundation was very relational. So when I got to a point in my life where I'm like, oh, I guess this being attracted to guys isn't going away, and I could sort of put on my big boy pants with God and have just new conversations about, hey, this isn't healthy or sustainable for me anymore. 'Cause most of my life I remained single, right? Because I felt like that was the way to honor God with my sexuality, because that was my traditional belief system, right? But the older I got, the more that didn't prove sustainable or really even healthy for me. And it wasn't about sex. It was about just relationship and family and that type of stuff, right? And I could lean in with God and have more, honest conversations about that. Maybe at, in my middle 30s, easier than I could when I was 14 or even 21.
Right.
So for me, it's just always been really relational, and it was hard because in my heart, I didn't want just God's tolerance. I wanted his blessing.
Yeah.
And that was a path. That was a path. But it wasn't an option for me to, but there's just such a difference between religion and church and obligation and having a real personal relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's the space I was coming from. So I knew that God could walk through it with me. And sometimes I even say, you know what? Even if I've got this wrong, it doesn't matter. God's got me, Do
you remember like when you really felt that in your bones and in your body? Do
you
remember that?
That's a great question, Heather. Not very often. I'm going to get choked up on this one. So I'm married to like the best dude in the world. And I never thought that was an option. Oh my gosh. Like even when I felt like God's like, okay, you don't have to try to be straight anymore. It wasn't even on my radar that I was going to like have this amazing husband and two girls right now. Yeah. Like my life is so blessed and charmed. But a lot of that was a step of faith, big time. It wasn't until our wedding, when we were taking our vows, that I said something like, like 80% of my vows were to Dan, but the first 20% was between me and God. And I just said, here I stand. I said, I spent most of my life thinking that this would not be possible. But here I stand before God and all these people with full confidence
Yeah.
that I get to marry you. And I realize even in the moment, I'm like, this is the first. I mean, you'd think I would have wanted to have a little more confidence before we actually were like saying our vows.
Yeah.
But that's an example of just like, for me, this has been a journey of faith.
Yeah.
You know, because it's just, and isn't that the journey of faith for all of us? Like, it's not about certainty. It's about just trusting God's got us no matter what. So I got a gift on my wedding day where I felt it in my bones. And so when sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat wondering if I got this wrong every once in a while, which I still do, this is a deeply held
of course,
issue.
yeah.
I just go lean on God and trust that he's got me, even if I've got this wrong.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about, when we're wrestling with, and it doesn't have to be necessarily in just our sexuality. It just wrestling with some of the many issues that's going on in the world right now, and kind of wrestling with, God, where are you in this, and what do I really believe, and trying so hard to like hold on to your faith and your identity, and that is a thing. But then when there's so many other voices, and obviously we were created to be in community and to belong. I was just wondering, like, how were you, and I'm sure it's ongoing, but able to kind of, maybe compartmentalize isn't the right word, but be able to put your feelings, and maybe your feelings getting hurt and people saying, rude things or questioning you when you're navigating and trying to figure it out yourself.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah. The best thing I can equate that to is like when I really came out pretty late in life, just because, like, as I said before, I felt like I, needed to remain single. And so in kind of my late 30s, when I came to new conclusions with God, well, then I'm like, oh, I guess I have to, everyone knew the old narrative of Brian.
Yeah.
And thankfully, and maybe this goes back to the beginning of why I have patience for, some conservative folks that don't seem like they deserve to have patience, and how they don't love their neighbors, or don't have figured out how to love their neighbors in a way that honors God. But I was really fortunate in that, like, when I started coming out to my parents and my conservative, my evangelical friends, because I really grew up in the church. I was immersed in the church. That was my, if you grew up in the church, that's just how it was.
Of
You
course.
lived in this
It's
bubble,
everything. It's everything.
There certainly were a couple of people that wrote me off. And there were a couple of people that were like, hallelujah, let's get you married. The vast majority were in the middle, going like, oh, okay, well, that's not how you've thought about it before, but I know that you love God, and that's not how I've thought about it before, but let's lean in. And so I don't know why, I don't think I'm unique in that way, but for some reason I've just been able to stay in the tension with my friends and my community, and even more now in the work of just folks of like, people want to lean into this stuff.
Yeah.
And figure it out, and do right by their kid or their neighbor, and do right by God. Like, people care about that in their hearts, I think,
I think you have a really beautiful framework that's really, really helpful for folks when trying to understand and create more empathy in their life. It's in your white paper. We'll make sure it's linked up in the show notes.
Yeah.
But first of all, just knowing people and knowing their stories. First of all, where do you come up with this framework? And I'm curious your process with that.
Yeah, it's probably not, it's certainly not my idea, but it's just like, if you wonder where the right first step is to, love your LGBTQ plus neighbor in a way that honors God and honors your neighbor, like, just know people's stories. It's just empathy, like, let your, and it's a bit of a very ultra conservative Christian thought to say, well, people shouldn't mess with your theology, right? Well, that's bad theology. It's not a slippery slope.
I was going to ask you about that, because that's what I was told my whole life.
If you're, we all have, right? Yeah, but like, we get to grow up and put our big boy and big girl Christian pants on, and live in the real world, and say, hey, if my belief system can't be stress tested with relationships, then it's faith probably isn't worth too much, right? So it's good to lean into just to know people's stories and to build your empathy so that you can be informed by real world. You know, a lot of I'll just speak specifically for like the gay community. Like there's a lot of stereotypes,
Yeah.
which really aren't true.
Yeah.
You know, there's no such thing as the gay lifestyle, for
Right.
example.
Right.
And it's really kind of insulting to use that language with people.
Right.
Like, you know, there's lots of gay and
Yeah.
lesbian people that lead responsible lives. I would argue it's the majority, right? So just knowing people's stories and putting faces to, you know, it's not an issue, it's people, and it's a lot of people that struggle with their relationship with God,
Yeah.
you know, and so just knowing people's stories and having empathy kind of tends to do the work.
I wonder how you can create a sense of safety to know someone's story when there is already a predetermined label on their head.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yep.
you work with a lot of folks who like their kids have come to them and they don't know what to do with this and
Right.
so forth. And it's like I'm curious how you kind of help them navigate. Like it's so funny how like the most simple questions are so hard, but like listening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
How do you help these folks with that?
Yeah, I mean,
Save the world, Brian. Come on, remember?
yeah.
We have an agenda here.
I think a lot of the things that I or like my organization Making Things Right and the people that I collaborate with and other like organizations that are sort of in this space of caring about Jesus, caring about the Bible, caring about the church, and caring about LGBTQ plus people. That's the ecosystem that I'm
Yeah.
talking about, you know? A lot of people are leaning in because they want to. I'm trying to answer your question, but like a lot of people that come to might find Making Things Right or find Embracing the Journey or find the Reformation Project or find, you know, whatever, are people that are already have had some spark, you know,
Yeah.
of interest to lean
Yeah.
into this thing,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not having to really convince a whole lot of people. I speak in terms of the quieter middle, or maybe even like, what did Nixon call it back in the quieter majority? You know, like
Yeah.
it's the talking heads get all the noise and all the news, and you know whether it's really on this particular issue, for example, like if you're really conservative and you know and Bible focus, and it just keeps you from being able to think about LGBTQ plus people as your neighbor, or people that are like super progressive or whatever. But the vast majority of us are somewhere in the middle. Like we may lean one way or the other on this issue, but we really are leaning in, trying to figure out what's right, what can honor God, what can honor our friends, our family. And so I think the vast majority of people like are drawn to these types of conversations and what Making Things Right does and stuff, because the tension between their head and their heart is unresolved. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
So I am a hopeless optimist. But
I'm glad you are. That takes strength to be an optimist. It really does. It really does.
I get very little. I've had a couple of windows of time. I've really only been kind of formally in this work kind of publicly since 2021. So it's still really early innings for me to try to use my voice and to help lead thoughts and stuff like that. There's a lot of other people and organizations that I collaborate with that have gone before me that, you know, I've been doing this work a lot longer than I have, but I really don't get a whole lot of critique. Because or maybe I just stopped paying attention to it. But the people that are in the extremes, like I don't even try to appeal to them.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like I mean, it's not fine, but like their heels are so dug in on how they believe about this, that, or the other that I'm like, that's not even my audience. I learned once with I'm actually working on my first book right now, which is super cool, and I can
Really
talk about that if you like. But when I started writing it, I was working with my team, and I was like, "Who is my target audience?" Right, and Marketing 201, and I'm like trying to delineate. And once I realized that my target audience is not the people in the extremes, I just went, "Oh,
Yeah.
what a relief."
Yeah.
And I'm really finding like there's just, the quieter majority maybe doesn't get the noise in the news, but that's the vast majority of the Christians that I talk to really resonate with how I talk about this stuff.
Yeah. I want to sit with this for a minute. I mean, if we don't get to the other 2 points, again, it'll be linked in the show notes, your white paper. But I want to sit with this no element and your point about the extremes.
Yeah.
Because one of the things also, too, I want to talk about was offense and wrestling with, because sometimes I call it throwing up on people. I'm just going to kind of throw up on you a little bit. I know it's really gross, but it's just true.
Well, you're far enough away, so I think I'm safe. But I'm grabbing my water.
You're like, oh boy, here we go. But I don't know. I've been really wrestling with this because I know I was born with a bent towards justice.
Mm-hmm.
I've been that way since I was a little girl.
Yeah.
I'd stand on the fireplace and, just like make a speech. Nobody's listening,
Yep.
And so there's this element where I think that there is so much truth and holiness and beauty and using your voice and advocating. And then also, too, there's this other element where just my heart is just so broken, and I know most people feel this way, where it's like feel like enemies, and we don't want to be enemies, and there's so much more going on. And there's also, not to get conspiracy theorists on you, like how much of this is an agenda to push me and you away from each other.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you talk about the extremes, like sometimes it's like how many people actually are extreme. But then there's this element where I kind of want to be extreme because I want to stand up and be a voice for people who my brothers and sisters and friends who I feel like are being mistreated.
Yes.
And it's so interesting trying to navigate that. And if within the context of being a follower of Jesus, which I've been returning back to that over the past couple of years, it's like, what is my role here?
Yeah. It was kind of like we were talking before we started about the balance of fighting injustice and just doing justice.
Please talk to me about that. I want to know what you mean.
Yeah, well, it's and I can only speak for myself or just sort of generic or stereotypically, but I think, doing justice is intentional. Fighting injustice is sort of natural, at least for me anyway. So it takes intentionality for me to just, it's sort of tricky because everybody has a different role and a different passion. So there are certain people and certain organizations that are in the business of fighting injustice, and thank God for them, right? So don't hear me wrong on this.
Yeah.
But when I have to look in the mirror every day and decide how I'm going to make this world a better place, we only have so much energy and so much time to give.
Right.
And I would argue that we have the capacity to do a lot of justice for the people that are in our spheres of influence. And I would also argue that you can't do a lot of that effectively when you're giving all your energy towards being angry at the injustice, right? So it's just like, think about that. First of all, think about how you're called. If you're called to be somebody to fight injustice, then forget what I just said. But I think most of us, it's easier to just react to stuff and to be angry about stuff. And I think there is value in turning the noise down on that in your own head and deciding, how can I give it at least 55% of my energy in this, of caring about this, towards just doing justice.
Give me an example of doing justice.
Well, just knowing that, specifically in LGBTQ, like knowing the LGBTQ plus people in your life, being intentional with them, being a safe place for them, inviting them, paying attention, especially, I mean, I think that the L and the G and the B has gotten a lot more favor in the last 10 to 15 years, proximity, where the T is like, oh my gosh, that's not even a Christian issue. That's just an American issue. Like most people statistically don't even know a trans person personally. That's not and then if it's religious, the statistics go up. So how do you be intentional about that? How do you, until I met two trans friends, did I not realize how much apathy and ignorance that I had about them. But then you meet people, and I just realize I don't really need to have an opinion about that's not my decision of whether who they are is right or
Right,
my
right.
job is to love them and to be a
Right.
safe place for them to be a healing, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I couldn't really authentically do that until I actually had two trans people that I knew their middle names and where they lived, and we actually hung out and I liked them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know, just giving space to just be intentional relationally to the LGBTQ plus community if you care about, you know,
Yeah.
versus just being angry at the folks that are hurting them.
Being an ally, and I know this is just speaking from your experience, how important is it to understand I'm laughing saying this because this is like a thorn in my side. It's the scripture element to right and wrong and sin and all
Sure,
of that.
sure.
You know what I mean? Is it because there's part of me that's just like, if we're going to argue about the details of this stuff, I'm not a scholar. I've never been really interested in like digging into the nuances of like all of that. Even when I was in Bible school, I was like, it wasn't my jam. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I liked being with people.
Yep.
But also too, I've also thought like, man, is there an element of responsibility there to understand like the nuances of scripture if you're going to be a follower of Jesus and be able to defend, you know, your stance. I don't know. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
That's a personal conviction thing.
Yeah.
I think I've never been hung up on 6 or 7 verses about homosexuality personally. But some people are, and they
Yeah.
need to make sense of that, you know. I remember how I said before that like my relationship with God has always been built relationally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like, of course the Bible's important, but like when I feel like I really understand the heart and the character of God, confusing verses become less confusing because I can always default back to the heart and the character of God. I don't have to get caught up in, well, what exactly did that mean? And was that timeless or you know, generational or whatever? Like I don't really get hung up on that because that's not the foundation of ultimately my relationship with God, even though the Bible is very important, you know? So that's me. Easier, right? But if you're like super heady and you love the Bible and all that stuff, then that's not as easy.
Yeah.
You know, so a great resource around that. But you know, everybody needs to, you know, especially if you're a Bible believing Christian or come from that background, you ultimately kind of have to wrestle with the Bible on a host of topics, right?
Right.
So I think that's a healthy exercise. I've just never really been hung up on it. But somebody who is really like, I don't know if you know Dr. David Gushee.
No, I don't.
Yeah, there's definitely other thought leaders out there that are great resources to sort of examine and re-examine what the Bible does and doesn't say about the LGBTQ plus, you know, community and people and stuff. He's always been my favorite. He lives here right in Atlanta. He wrote a book called Changing Our Mind.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, 2014. Prior to that book, he was, I'm going to butcher his credentials here, but he was he's a distinguished professor of Christian ethics at Mercer. He was like the president of the Christian Academy or whatever. He was like one of the for sure in the evangelical world.
Is he on your show?
Yep, he was.
I heard him.
Yeah,
Never
yeah.
mind.
He was the real deal, right? From a Christian ethics standpoint. He came out with this book, lost like 95% of his Christian audience overnight. But it's interesting how he's kind of slowly grown back into becoming a real thought leader now on this subject, other subjects too, but specifically on this one. Wonderful guy. And he just knows how to lean. He comes from a Southern Baptist conservative background, and how his process of changing his mind and leaning into the Bible. And when I did a podcast with him, which was probably, for sure, like my most downloaded podcast, called The Quieter Middle.
Yeah.
I think it was episode 5 or something, when we launched my podcast the first time. And I kept asking him about the 6 verses, and there are 6 or 7 verses, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that specifically speak to homosexuality in the Bible. I kept leaning in on that. He's like, Brian, it's the wrong question, is essentially what he said. You know, he said it's not about, he basically started with Christian history. And the historical context of how we get things wrong and why, and how we come back around and repent of that and da-da-da-da-da. And then he went into the entire narrative of the Bible. And then he went down to the 6 verses. And it was just his macro to micro sort of approach of biblically understanding this with the context of the whole Bible and Christian history is just a brilliant, simple way of sort of wrestling with this, I think, rather than just looking at one verse and trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like, and I'm putting words in your mouth. You haven't, I don't think, said this exactly, but it seems as though when you talk about this, you're really talking about like an embodied approach to knowing God and like feeling God, which when I was growing up, I was always taught, that the body is sinful, your heart is sinful.
Can't trust your feelings.
You can't trust it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's so frustrating sometimes, because like we can feel truth.
Yeah.
But then our brains like will argue with us.
Yeah.
And you talk about this. This was like season 1, I think, a lot about like crossroads. I think you had a couple episodes on crossroads, and I was thinking about that, and just in terms of not necessarily, again, this isn't exclusive to like your sexuality, but just like anything you're wrestling with that goes against like conventional teaching in the Western culture,
or what you grew up in, or whatever. Yep.
There's this decision we have to make at some point of like, am I going to be seen? And am I going to potentially lose everything, potentially be wrong?
Yeah.
And that's so hard. I'm curious, just your experience, like with your journey, like what gave you the courage to cross over that crossroad?
Mm-hmm. When I can speak for myself, and I could speak for other people too, but my own story, when I kind of hit that point where, trying to be straight and all that, or single or whatever, just wasn't proving healthy for me. I mean, when I started wrestling with God on that, like I used to say it was a 2-year wrestling match. And then when I was working on my book, because my book's not a memoir, it's really a tapestry of stories of other people, but I used the first chapter to do just like a mini memoir.
Yeah.
And I was trying to decide, where will I start? Writing a book's so fascinating. I'm learning like this art. It's like any good movie. It doesn't just go from point A to point Z and everything in between. It dives you into the middle, and then you back up and stuff.
That's how I do my interviews. Have you noticed?
Yeah.
Like so wrestling all around.
So it's fun that I'm learning that art of how to write a compelling story. So I decided to start my story literally the day 1 of the crossroads.
Ooh.
When I was 36, 37 years old, and I was at a softball field with some friends. I feel like I'm going on a rabbit trail. I'm going to forget your question. Anyways, it's a good story. And there was a brief window of time in college where I experimented with being gay, but it's just the tension in me and God. It was just too much, and so I couldn't do it, and so I just stopped trying to.
Did anybody know that, or did you?
It was pretty secret. It's pretty. I mean, my friends knew, but my family didn't know.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Anyways, but at that time, I briefly dated a couple of guys, and anyway, so I was at the softball field. Cheering on some friends at a softball game, and there's this guy across the line on third base, and I was like, he started heading over my direction, and I'm like, is that? No. Literally was the last guy that I ever dated like 15 years ago. Or 14 years ago. And he was kind of a jerk, actually. But so it's not like it wasn't like this, love affair, and that's who I married or anything. But the beginning of that is when somebody came back into my life and made me reignited, basically, just that I'm a gay man, and that's part of who I am, right?
Yeah.
So that, anyways, but that immediately began this, wrestling match with God of like, what am I going to do? And it was really less about the relationship with this person. That was just the catalyst of me to have to lean in and have new conversations with God,
Yeah.
And part of it was wrestling with the Bible. Part of it was wrestling with my own conscience and all of that. And eventually I don't know why it took so long, but it's like I said, I didn't want just God's tolerance. I wanted his blessing. And all of my life, I grew up thinking that I really genuinely thought that I was supposed to honor God in a certain way.
Right.
I thought that God told me that stuff.
Right.
So I had to go back and unwind right? Because if I was going to continue to trust God, I needed to go back and realize that, no, that wasn't God. That was church or that was whatever, right? Like, because all that got mixed up. So it just, when I eventually got done kind of wrestling with God and knew that I had his permission to quit staring at my navel and trying to fix my sexuality and to just go be Brian, just go change the world and be Brian. I got you no matter what. One thing that really helped me at the time, I started wrestling with those verses in the Bible, and I'm like, I couldn't figure it out. And I felt like God kind of led me back to the book of John.
Yeah.
And I read the book of John, and I still have my notes. I just did this deep dive study, and I just got reminded about the character of God and how salvation is simple.
Simple.
Yeah, and Jesus was like, if you know me, you know the Father. And if you're good with me, you're good with the Father. And I just got reminded on a really deep level of the character of God, how he shows up with people, and that absolutely nothing can separate us from the love of God. So then when I knew that in my bones, I'm like, oh, so I'm okay, even if I got this wrong. He's like, yeah, just go live your life. And it was when I finally stepped out, in faith, I wasn't sure that I had it right, but I was sure that God was with me. And sorry if I'm rambling, but
you're not.
One unexpected surprise was the unbelievable level of wholeness that came back to my life and productivity and like not spending all this energy staring. And I realized that all that work was very narcissistic and very myopic. I thought that it was holiness. But really, I was just staring at my navel, trying to make sure that I was checking my boxes, and I was missing, oh my gosh, like the level of productivity and how I've been able to like serve people. Even if I got this wrong, it was the best decision I ever made. Because now I can like make the world a better place and actually be present to relationships and all that stuff, so.
When you were talking, I was thinking about how like this process that you have, you're kind of was doing it on yourself too. It's like you had to get to know yourself.
Yeah.
And then you had a choice where you had to respond to what you and know God, like find out who God is for you and know that in your bones. And then you had a choice to respond. What's the third step?
No, respond. Probably
engage.
Engage. Yeah. Like just do something about it. Like so get to know people, have empathy, respond to that. Like let the stories of people inform your theology, inform your belief systems. That's true about loving our immigrant neighbors these days.
That's
like
so
good. Just know people, let that inform your belief systems, and then decide what you want to do about that.
You're holding these calls. I don't think they were live calls in your first season of your show. Like you were doing conversations with folks and starting to publish those a few years ago.
Yep.
And then at some point, tell me if I'm wrong on this, you decided to open up the Zoom room and invite an audience to come in and ask questions to your guests, which maybe I shouldn't be like so impressed with like that, but your bravery, because maybe that should just be a normal thing to do. But when I first learned that you were doing that and like being genuinely like, curious about what other people think, even if they disagree with you, and giving them a voice, I'm like, damn.
It was really a natural thing. Like, so we launched this initiative, Making Things Right, back in 21. And, with any creative project, you just kind of throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks, right?
That's the way it works.
And one of the things that just naturally happened were people were like, hey, like how do people wanted to connect, MTR was a little more of a thought leadership advocacy thing. It wasn't like we didn't have support groups. It wasn't a community thing.
You start as a podcast?
Yeah. It was I worked with a creative team and we just kind of put together I wrote the white paper. Yeah. They wanted me to write a book back then. And I'm like, I don't freaking have time to write a book. So I wrote a white paper. I'm like, what the heck is a white paper? They're like, just, a 15 to 20 page problem statement solutions invitation. I'm like, okay, I can do that. Yeah. So that was cool. It was a great exercise. And then we did a mini, like a 7-episode podcast to sort of flesh that out, and some videos and website, and just threw it out to the world and see what would happen.
Were you nervous putting it out into the world?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very nervous.
Yeah.
Funny you say that. it felt like coming out again.
I was wondering because I
To
was like, you had to
my-
go through that once privately, and then you were going public.
Yeah, to my conservative, especially to like sort of I mean, I've had to move on from some relationships that just couldn't see eye to eye, but I kind of felt like once I put it more into the public arena, I probably would get some initial sort of critique from folks trying to save my soul,
Yeah.
So some of that happened, but it was a way for me to just kind of grow up a little bit, and just say, I care about this work enough that if it means that I'm going to have difficult conversations, then so be it. Like
It's a good way of looking at it.
yeah, I mean, but it was part of the cost for sure. I don't care about that now,
Yeah.
But the only, you know how it goes. Usually critiques of strangers don't hurt you. It's the critiques of people that know you.
Oh, friend, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then how did that evolve into where because you're
yeah.
having like hundreds of people show up to these calls.
It's crazy that it's blown up. So it just started with people going, hey, like, we want to connect. I'm like, okay, well, let's do Zoom meetups or whatever. It's like 6 people get on the phone and we'd have some topic to discuss. And, then I started bringing in sort of like speakers. And so then maybe like 20 or 30 people would come. And then I hired this wonderful woman who does, some communications and marketing for me. And in 24, and she's like, we got to blow this thing out. We got to,
I like her.
I'm like, okay. And so she gets like this great lineup of great people, and I've been in this work enough that people know me and trust me now. It's a pretty small, quirky ecosystem of people that love Jesus and gay people. So we are queer people. So it's like, I've been able to meet the Dr. Gushys of the world and the, people that love to collaborate, on this stuff and move the needle. So she lined up this, great lineup of guests and, whatever. And then we just ended up having like 900 registrants that season. And then last season we had like over 2,000 registrants and 5 events. It was crazy. So, but what's a good sign is that, good old marketing, it's like, follow the money. Like, I mean, not that we're making money on this, but like follow where the energy is. Right. And it was just natural that people want to get in a room and hear from people and talk to each other about how do we move the needle on this and really represent Jesus. This year, the theme of the event series was reclaiming Jesus, loving and defending our LGBTQ plus neighbors. So, and even though that doesn't sound that controversial, like that was even a little edgy for me.
Yeah.
Because I really like for people to feel like they have a safe on-ramp to this conversation.
Yeah.
I don't want to yell at you if you don't think that I should be married to my great husband, right? Like, I want you to come into the room and let's figure this out. But it had a really amazing dialogues this season, which is great, which we repurposed those into podcast episodes.
Is there like a reoccurring question that people bring to the table over and over and over again?
Well, whenever people register for those events, I literally in the registration form, it's a required field to say, what do you hope for in this call?
Yeah.
And it's going to test my memory, but this whole season, it was always just a couple things. That was unique to this year, I think, and this maybe like this political administration and the tension that's happening, out there that's been there, but it just seems like it's kind of on steroids this year.
Yeah,
right?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, 26 or 25 especially. People want hope.
I was going to say hope. I knew that. Yeah.
And hope seems kind of ridiculous, right? So how do we talk about real bona fide hope in this type of an environment? One of my he kicked off the season, Ben Crummer, who's just an amazing thought leader to follow. He is just brilliant. He's got a lot more followers than I do, as he should. And he has a great quote, which I'm going to butcher, but he said, hope is not about it's not about false hope. It's about recognizing the severity of an environment and believing in the redemptive possibilities of what's coming after that. Right?
Yeah.
That's almost the difference between like putting energy against antagonistic people versus just loving people and doing your part. So believing in the redemptive possibilities on the other side of the current situation. That was his definition of hope. I'm like, I'm writing that on a Post-it and put it on my mirror. So people were looking for hope because they were desperate.
Yeah.
You know, and then the hope that we have now in this current environment is not a tomorrow hope. It's a get there, get out of this, get there type of hope down the road. And they just wanted to learn how to be more effective allies and advocates. You know, specifically on my show, we talk about the LGBTQ plus community.
Right.
You could absolutely say that to immigrants these days, right?
Absolutely.
Like, or any, or trans people in particular, you know, where there's much more, you know, like it's not acceptable anymore to be homophobic, but it's absolutely acceptable to be transphobic, right? So there's a lot more need there.
True.
So,
How do you keep your heart tender?
How do I keep my heart tender?
I'm asking you questions I wrestle with, just so you know.
What a great question. I just believe in the best of people. How? I think my mom taught me that, and I think the closer I stay to the heart of God and Jesus, the more tender my heart stays, I guess. You know? And the more that that's probably why I do err towards not fighting injustice, because that shit just makes you angry.
It's hard not to get angry.
It's real hard to not get angry.
I was angry yesterday.
Yeah. And, you know, Jesus flipped tables, you know.
Yeah.
But he probably spent more time hanging out with people than flipping tables.
You know what's interesting is I love your answer. It's get back to the heart of Jesus. But what we've been taught to get to Jesus, sometimes that framework is so hard to return to.
Or so don't. Find your own.
Talk to me about that, because it's like, okay, go back to church.
No.
Read the Bible.
Right.
Say the prayer.
I've outgrown church. I mean, like, it's so good to. I probably should give context to that statement, but it
you don't need to.
Doesn't matter. Like, Richard Rohr, who's
come on,
amazing.
I love him.
Yeah, and he wrote this book about two chapters of life, or what is it? Falling forward.
It's not falling forward. I know what it is. It's the two halves of life, or
something like that. I know what you're talking about. So it's written to, like, you know, folks like us who are like 40 plus, and we know a thing or two, but we're still learning stuff. And he basically was talking about church and organized religion, and he goes, and so when you've gotten to this stage of life, you now realize and can see the intrinsic value of church and community.
Yeah.
And you've also probably outgrown it.
Yep.
It was like the most liberating thing I heard. I'm like, oh, really?
Relief. Yeah.
I really can, like, sleep in on Sundays and like find my spiritual home and community and not need church for that. Woo! I felt so great. So, like, but, you know, like, it's different. Like, if you want to go to church, that's awesome. And if I had a couple younger kids, I probably would want, you know, whatever. But it was just a relief to know that the way that I found God as a kid, or the ways that I found God as a young adult, or even the ways that I found God 3 years ago, are not the ways that I need to find him today, right? And on the other side of that crossroads, I have a whole different perspective on what it looks like to find God and hang out with God. Yeah. And it runs deeper than it ever has, but it doesn't look like it used to. Yeah. It's distinctly Christian, too. I haven't turned into a universalist, although I think that's cool.
Yeah.
I still believe in the teachings of Jesus, and he's my model, and he's my hero. And so I'm more of a Christian than I am spiritual. But it just looks entirely different and entirely so much deeper. But it's not based in certainty, and it's not based on old rules and stuff.
I'll circle back to that original question. I talked about loyalty to God. I want to ask that in response, like Jesus. In your opinion, your experience, why was that so important to hang on to those teachings? because, it's a universalist thing, but people can argue like, well, source, universe, and all that. But
Yeah.
Jesus is like, that's a trigger word.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'd say if it's a trigger, then just don't use it. Like God's big enough. Like I relate to the person of Jesus Christ, but I don't feel obligated to call myself a Christian and stay in the little box.
Yeah.
Like it works for me. And I think he really modeled what I want to believe about God.
Mm-hmm.
So it really works for me. But if it was a trigger for me, then I think Jesus would be the first one to say, well, then don't use my name. Like God isn't, you know what I mean?
It's wild how, again, we keep saying like this is so simple, but like really truth, like in the being truth, it's so simple and free and not complicated. It's like we in our like own ego is like tension, like, no, I've got to figure it out and know what's the answer. And it's just like, chill, babe, chill.
But, it takes some bravery. Like we grew up in systems where we're supposed to be obedient and to serve God. And now I believe in God in a way where like I'm kind of a grown up. I can sit at the table with him and reason with him. And I think that's why we reasoned. And he said, okay, like, you're good. Don't worry about not being gay. Like, we're good. Go live your life. Maybe he doesn't have that conversation with everybody. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's like, I feel like we can lean in and have like real, meaningful, rich adult conversations with God, not like in diapers.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about your book. Anything you don't want to talk about in that, we can cut that part out of the podcast.
Okay.
But you just share like what the book's about, and if you feel comfortable sharing about choosing, wanting to stay with a publisher that.
Yeah.
You're kind of your rationale there, because my thought would be like, isn't that scary?
Yeah.
I know you've been doing this work for a while, but that's still another level of exposure.
Yeah.
That's coming your way.
Yeah, it'll be like, yep. Yeah, I guess I never thought of that.
Sorry. Aren't you afraid?
I know. No, I
like,
wasn't
I am now.
before. Yeah. So the title of the book, you're going to love the title. It's called A Quiet Reformation.
Oh, I do love that.
Just think about that. I love the day when I landed on that. A Quiet Reformation. Subtitle is something like The Increasing Wonder of Loving Our LGBTQ plus neighbors.
Love it.
That's it. And it's a narrative nonfiction, which means it's a tapestry of stories to make a point. It's more descriptive than prescriptive. And it's and I've always known the roadmap for the book, and I'm halfway through it, and it's never strayed, which is cool. And I start with my story, just one chapter, and that was very uncomfortable because I'm a private person, believe it or not. But I felt like if I wanted to earn the trust of folks that maybe don't think that like I should call myself a Christian to be gay, like if that's my audience, then I need to kind of show up and be vulnerable, about what I'm not so sure about and all of that, Yeah. And then I moved to the next 3 chapters are the stories of LGBTQ plus people growing up in church, so kind of the problem statement.
Yeah.
Just to raise awareness there. I try not to do it, I try to represent the hurts and the hopes, right? So chapter 4, I kind of pull out of really difficult stories that deserve our attention.
Yeah.
I hope I did it with respect and not, grandiosely or whatever, but like I tried to really dive into like, this is the reality of LGBTQ plus people growing up in church. We need to be aware of this. And I just dove into some amazing stories there. Chapter 3, 28 minutes that haunt me. And the story of Caleb is arguably the emotional epicenter of the book. And then chapter 4, I pulled out to more stories of redemption. Of folks that somebody came in, some pastor came in or some parent came in and agreed to disagree and turned it around, and their families experienced healing and stuff. So that was the first 4 chapters is the LGBTQ plus narrative. Yeah. And then the next couple of chapters are about parents, mostly conservative Christian parents whose kids came out and they're like, oh, shit.
Right.
What am I going to do now, right? And their stories. And they all went differently. Not everyone became 100% affirming or glad their kid got married. Like there was some tension built into that. But they learned the art of respecting other people's relationships with God and their conclusions and being able to find, what's the true calling of loving my kid, and then and then kind of the back. So that's kind of the stories. The back half of the book is sort of like the state of the Christian church. Right. So like the first half is kind of like the heart, and the second half is kind of the head. It's still just it's still stories. It's still unpacking like what is the state of the Christian church. You know, I did a little bit of a history lesson of the last 20 years, and there, you know, prior to this administration, not to blame Trump for everything, but like prior to this administration in 2016, really historically, the dividing line was gay marriage, I think, when I looked my research, especially in the church. Then churches were really forced to make a decision of what they were going to do. Between like 2005 and 2015, there was actually really civil discourse amongst evangelicals on this subject about, oh, I could see that. I'm not sure, you know, so we've kind of pivoted back to a real extreme argument around this subject theologically, but it hasn't always been that way in the recent history. So I do a little bit of that. And then I just feature some evangelical trailblazers, you know, like the Stan Mitchells of the world that stood in front of his 3,000, you know, evangelical church in the middle of the Bible Belt and said that we're going to marry gays, and got a lot of lost his entire, you know, and what they're still doing in the world today. And then I finished just with stories of everyday churches behind the scenes today that are wrestling with this and learning how to love LGBTQ plus people better, consistent with their faith in and outside of their congregation. So it's just this narrative of stories that proves that despite the noise in the news, behind the scenes, there's a lot of Christians, you know, rethinking what it means to love LGBTQ plus people.
And we need to hear that. I think the best way probably for folks to find out about that would, tell me if I'm wrong on this, join your email list, which we'll put in the show notes. And then along with that, you know, you have these events that people can join, and you don't have to say anything. You can just come and listen. The podcast, all of that will be linked in the show notes. And we feature
resources. I try not to put too many resources in the website because that becomes like a part-time job. But I do have particular organizations and thought leaders and books that I think are a great place to start. You know, that aren't like super progressive in their theology. They're just really inviting us to be curious and to think about what is indeed the Christian response and responsibility to a community that has been historically harmed by religion. It's a really simple, low agenda question.
All that be linked in the show notes. Very last question before then. On the way here, I was thinking, and this is, I was going to say this is so cheesy, but I'm just a cheesy girl, so you haven't picked that up yet. But I was just thinking, I am so honored to get to talk to this guy and know you now.
Like me?
Yes.
Feelings mutual.
The work you're doing is so important. It's so important, and not everybody can do it. Not everyone can do it. And the things that you preach, you're living out. You know what I mean? I've just been moved. I've been so moved listening to your content and then just having hope again.
Good.
In what I'm supposed to do with my life.
Yes.
I don't have to scream at everybody, which I might sometimes, but that there's other ways to do justice. Doing justice. So you are a badass, and I'm so glad to know you.
Thanks.
Very last question. What is something in your life right now that you are deeply questioning? And it can be related to what we're talking about, or it could be, like my big thing right now is like the clock it thing. I think I'm doing it wrong. Is that it?
I don't know. What are you doing?
I don't know. My 13-year-old, she comes up, she's like, clock it.
Clock it? I have no idea what
I was trying to do it yesterday, and I did this. She's like, Mom, that's Baby Shark.
I don't know.
So
I'm apparently square and not with the younger generation because I have no idea what this means.
That's my question that I've had lately. So, again, it could be something related to what we talked about. It could be the clock it thing. But what's been on your mind lately that you have a big question mark around?
Two things I think of. One is just with the book. This is a very tactical answer, but like we're really. I have a wonderful agent who's taken a shot at me because I'm a first-time author. You know, with a pretty modest following. Like all the publishers aren't going to be lining up for me, so she's really a wonderful agent, and we're trying to target Christian publishers that typically have more of a conservative to moderate audience. But I'm a gay married dude, you know, which maybe most of your audience would have no issue with. But, you know, if you come from a conservative background,
That's a
dudes aren't
big-
supposed to get
yeah.
married. Right? It's a big hang up with
Yeah.
which is just so ironic because, like, well, would you rather me like live a single promiscuous life or actually be? But
Yep.
anyways,
Yep.
but so one thing is just a big question mark to me is I'm just really hopeful that a mainstream traditional Christian publisher is ready for a gay married man to lead a more redemptive dialogue amongst Christians about this. I'm hopeful for that.
I am too.
So we'll see. And then bigger picture, what am I concerned about or question marking is just, I think just life. I'm
Yeah, no joke.
I'm a human, and I'm just always I think the older I get, the more that I care about. Not legacy, but like just, am I really doing stuff that matters?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And so I just think about, you know, I'm kind of leaning in with my board and my organization, and just, you know, kind of changing up. I'm just trying to think about, where do I really, really, really want to give my time? What's my highest joy and my best contribution? I am a believer theologically that what I want and God's oughts are one and the same, like the desires of my heart. Like, so when I dig deep, like what really gives me joy and what's my highest contribution? So I'm just thinking about that in life, because life is busy and everybody always wants your time.
Yeah.
And you could, you know, wake up 10 years later and just not have done that thing you really wanted to do because you're just reacting all the time. So I'm trying to level set and make the noise and really just figure out, what do I want to do this year and in the next couple of years that matters the most.
Yeah.
With generic answer, but
it's
that's
not
what
a
I'm thinking
generic
about.
answer.
Yeah.
With that said, thank you for investing time into this show and this community. Thank you so much. So this is awesome.
My pleasure.